most of us like it when we have lots of people here to comment one way or the other. Maybe not, but I do. So anyway, welcome to everyone. We have two bills this morning. We're going to take a look at Senate File 88, hunting licenses weighted bonus point system first. This is probably the one that most of you are interested in. And so I know we have some agency folks here, Director Nesvik, and it's like his party of three. So welcome. Glad to hear your thoughts on this bill.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Brian Nesvik, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish, and I have here with me today our Fiscal Chief, Greg Phipps, as well as our Licensing Manager, Jennifer Doring. We also will have, I do know we've got at least one member of the Wyoming Wildlife Task Force here in the room, Joe Schaefer, who many of you know in his other role as President of Laramie County Community College. And I'm sure that he will be prepared to speak when I'm done to talk a little bit about his perspective on some of the task force's work on this particular issue. We may have other task force members, I suspect, online. And I'm going to check real quick in the room and see if we had any others show up. I think that's it. So I won't go back through since I did. All of you were here, well, except for Senator Guru, but he knows the deal. I won't go back and rehash what we've already talked about as far as the history with Wildlife Task Force, but this bill here we're discussing this morning is another bill that was consequential to their work and study. This is one of the topics that was taken up fairly early in the task force process. This particular bill, essentially what it does is it makes a transition from our current system for allocating those licenses that are the hardest to draw and maybe the most desirable in our state, mainly moose and bighorn sheep. Currently, the system that we have in place and has been in place for over 20 years now, about 26, it allocates 75% of the licenses that are available to those folks with the highest preference points. A person can accumulate one preference point per year. And so if you've been in from the get-go, from day one, and have not drawn a license, you could be sitting right now at 20, I believe it's 26 or 27 preference points. I'm sorry, I was corrected, 28. So it's been in place for 28 years now. So if those max preference point holders have, they go into the draw for 75% of the licenses for a given hunt area and quota. Now, obviously, over time, many hunt areas that it doesn't require the maximum anymore. As hunters draw and over time, that number decreases, but we still have some hunt areas in the state for both, or for at least bighorn sheep anyway, where you have to have the maximum number of points in order to draw. The other 25% of the licenses are just going to a random draw spread across everybody who applied for that particular license. One of the things that we've seen happening, and this has come up for several years now, concerns that a person who comes into the system now, because of the increase in the demand, at the same time that the number of licenses that we're offering compared to 28 years ago is much lower, that really a person could be dissuaded from even getting into the system because their chances are so low coming in today with the current system that they may never have any kind of a realistic opportunity. What this bill would do, if it was to pass, it would implement a bonus point system. And so essentially all people would go in, all applicants would go into a random draw. The bonus point portion of this, though, still provides an incentive and also an advantage if you've been in the system longer. If you've been applying longer, you still have a better chance. And the reason is that while it's a random draw, as you accumulate bonus points, you also increase the number of chances that you have in the draw. So instead of taking the highest number of point holders and allocating 75% through a random draw, this would take all applicants and their number of bonus points and put them into like a lottery. So if you have 10 bonus points, your bonus points would also be to even give you more of an advantage for being in for so many years. Your bonus points would be squared. So you would go into the draw with 100 chances, 101 chances actually, at drawing a license, whereas the person that had 2 preference points or 2 bonus points would have 2 squared, 4, they'd have 4 chances. So it still gives, over time, it gives people that are at the younger folks an opportunity, and it does shift. When this was modeled, and hopefully President Schaefer can talk about, he had his crew out at LCCC model this and do a lot of predictive analysis. When you model this over time, it does change the average age of the successful applicant. Currently, with bighorn sheep, the average age of a sheep hunter is 58. And that number just continues to go up every year. And so this, if this was to be implemented, would change that so that the average age was younger. Again, it does take licenses that would be allocated to older folks and spread them to younger aged folks. But if you project this over time and you look at it over time, I really think for the long haul, this is what's needed if we're going to continue to have young people get into the system and try to draw a license. So some other things that I think are worthy of mentioning. This was something that the task force received a lot of public comment on, had a lot of discussion on, did a lot of study. Like I said, Joe Schaefer provided a lot of really good modeling and predictive analysis that was considered by the task force. All preference point holders were sent a survey. The results of the survey were 60% of the respondents were in favor of this conversion to a bonus point system. The other thing that it does is certainly if you're one of those folks that is very close to drawing, so you're close to the top end of that maximum number of 28 points, this could affect you if tomorrow this changes and now you were really close to drawing and all of a sudden now you're into this random drawing system where your odds are going to go down. This bill would, in its current form, would allow this to happen over a 4-year transition period. That number is not arbitrary. When Joe and his crew looked at the current existing preference point holders and where there's kind of a line where, if you're within 4, you're likely going to draw in the next 4 years if you're within that top 4. And then after that, it almost gets watered down because there's so many folks with, I think the number was about 23 at the time, 23 preference points, that it really was a wash at that point. And so the number there was data and facts that were used in order to establish that 4-year transition period. The last thing I would say before I ask for any of your questions is that I think, this isn't something that's urgent that has to happen tomorrow, but I do think for the long term, we've got to make a change here. I mean, this is something that couldn't have been predicted 28 years ago when the legislature enacted this existing law. And so, fiscally, very difficult to predict how this could impact the department. I don't believe that it has the potential over the long term to have a negative revenue impact. I think that this is completely speculation, but folks would be more incentivized to buy preference bonus points in the new system. And so, we could have an increase in the number of folks that are actually in the system, which would be a revenue positive situation for the department. So with that, Madam Chair, I would stand for any questions.
Questions? Director? Senator Baldwin.
Just a quick question. I did a quick read through the bill last night, but I believe that if someone misses a year, as in the current system, if they miss applying, is it still the same? Is it a 2-year or 1 year, or do they lose their points if they don't apply that 1 year? Exactly how is that spelled out in it?
Yeah, absolutely. Director? Madam Chair, Senator Baldwin. So right now they can miss a year and still be okay and maintain their points, but if they miss 2, then they do lose their points.
Other questions? Comments?
Madam Chair, my recommendation is that President Schaefer have the opportunity here to speak next as a member of the Wyoming Wildlife Task Force.
Sure. I'm glad you explained, though, the transition. That was one of the questions that I had, was how you came up with that. So that gives me a little bit of clarity on that. So Appreciate that.
You
So,
bet.
no other questions? Well, thank you.
All right.
Let's go ahead and bring up Mr. Schaefer then. Hang around. We'll
Yeah, I'll
probably have
hang
some other
around and
questions.
see if
Yeah.
he needs any backup here.
Welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself, even though most of us know you.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joe Schaefer. On my day job, I'm the president of Laramie County Community College, and every now and then I get the opportunity to testify and work on some things outside of education. So thank you for the opportunity just to share some thoughts about the work. You know, the first thing that I just start with is just as a reminder, especially for those new to the work, you know, the task force was essentially an 18-month effort by numerous individuals representing broad perspectives, trying to tackle some of these real sort of hairy and tricky issues. And in many ways, the legislation that you'll see, and I think the rules changes or the proposals to the commission that they see really represent our best effort at compromise and finding the solutions for issues that really don't have any perfect solutions. And so I'll just make a few comments. The first thing that I'll say is that one of the things we get caught up on is confusing the issues of scarcity and equity. You know, scarcity is really the problem that we have. There's nothing that we can do more today to help address the issues that many hunters, many fishermen, women, hunters bring forward than to put more animals on the ground and take care of the habitat that we have. In fact, that's probably the biggest issue that's leading to a lot of this strain and stress is that we have increasing demand for these types of opportunities and decreasing numbers of animals. And so when we talk about things like preference points, bonus points, what we're really talking about is equity, not addressing scarcity. There is no model, no system that will guarantee everybody who wants to hunt where they want to hunt, when they want to hunt, what they want to hunt, that opportunity. They just don't exist. And I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges with the drawing system as it existed. And so I won't bore you with the details of different drawing systems, but a preference point system is designed essentially to give the permits to those who have preference by having the most number of points. It is based on the premise that we will eventually be able to guarantee everybody a license. That just doesn't exist anymore. We simply cannot do that. And so the system in and of itself is really phallic in the fact that it cannot deliver on the purpose that it was designed for. And so we did take some time and for the task force worked on some statistical modeling, trying to figure out, you know, let's take a look at what is the best solution when we know there's no perfect solution. The other thing I'll just say is too that people who hunt and fish are very, very passionate about the outdoors. And depending on your unique life circumstance, your perspectives on that is very different, whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you have lots of preference points or you don't have any preference points, whether you have access to private ground or you're a public land hunter. And so one of the things that makes challenging for us is just every individual voice is unique. And so trying to find a system that somehow addresses everything is incredibly challenging. So we did do some statistical modeling. And as the good director said, you know, one of the things that we found in the data right off is that there are these demarcation points in sheep and moose where you have a relatively small number of high point holders. And for sheep, looking at our numbers, that's about 22 or 23, I think, as the director said, where you have smaller numbers in there. Moose, it goes down a little bit further, closer to 20 or 18. And then after that, you see large numbers of applicants that jump up. So there is a clear demarcation in the point system. So what we wanted to do was model essentially, you know, what system essentially gives the highest probability, lifetime probability, being able to draw one of these coveted tags. And again, there is no system that guarantees it for everybody. And that's one of the things that I just really, really want to stress. And so we're looking at what is the one that has the highest probability of lifetime drawing. Now, the problem with statistical modeling, especially around human behavior, is you have to take in a lot of assumptions. And so I can give you all those details, you know, but we looked at the current rates of new applicants, how long somebody stays in, the dropout rate, what we believe to be the typical lifetime hunting age for when they would be. So there's lots of assumptions we have to make. Even the highest point holders that could have drawn at any given year over the last 5 years don't always actually apply for the tag. And so there's these nuances, the way people behave that makes it kind of hard to run statistical modeling. But we did do the modeling. We did the modeling on the current allocation, the status quo. If we shifted the allocation between preference and bonus points, what happened there? We did a modeling to look at, what's the probability in all these different nuanced views. The first thing I'll tell you is no system will generate good drawing odds over lifetime probability. In fact, until we put more animals on the ground or people just stop applying, the odds are not going to be very good. And that's just one of the things we have to be able to live with. When we looked at the status quo and actually calculated lifetime probability based on a preference point system. So a preference point system that's supposed to guarantee you will eventually draw a tag. If somebody starts when they're young and applies every single year, so 16 to 18 every single year, lifetime probability of drawing for a bighorn sheep is 14.5%. which generally means people age out, die, or just stop applying, and that's why it's not guaranteed. For moose, it's a little bit higher at 20%. And then, of course, as we tinkered with the ratio of how many in a preference point versus bonus point, it drops from there. We talked a lot about phasing this out. Okay, so let's just phase it out over time, and then we'll move to something new. And so we modeled phasing out, and just building off the assumptions we'd have no new applicants and no one moves, drops out, or dies until they draw. For sheep, it would take us 90 years to age out the preference point holders, and for moose, about 73 years. So that really didn't work in our favor. When we looked at age, phasing this out, where people would age out, assuming when they'd hit 65 or 70, they would drop out of the system, it still takes us 53 years to fully phase out preference point systems. 32 years for sheep and 52 years for moose. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can't figure out what I'm doing next week. The thought of managing a system through the department to figure out how to phase something out over 53 years was just too daunting. So that's where we looked at the concept of these random draws. So instead of saying we have a preference point system where eventually if you have the most preference points, you'll earn a tag, shifting to a bonus point system. And as the director said, a bonus point system is simply a lottery. So for every point you have, you get one entry into the system. And we started modeling those types of things in a true random where there's no points. Every year, everybody's in the same mix like we currently have for mountain goat. The lifetime probabilities are actually worse than the preference point system slightly. So about 14% for sheep and then 15% for moose. When you implement a point system for every year that you don't draw, you get additional points. So if I've been applying for 10 years, I get this year's entry plus 10 more, your lifetime probabilities go up, almost 20% for bighorn sheep and 21.2% for moose. And then when we modeled the weighted bonus point system, so this is essentially taking the points that you have, squaring them, and then adding one for the application in this year, that's where we see the most movement. Again, they're not great, but for sheep, we see the odds go up to about 21% of lifetime probabilities, and for moose to about 24% lifetime probabilities. The reason that you weight points, especially where you have a lot of point holders between, in every increment, is that actually helps spread the distribution of those point holders. And so the longer you're in and weighting, that actually moves you further and further to the right. And so that was important for us. So that's really, when we modeled it, we said, this is probably the best solution that we have to guarantee lifetime probability. Now, a random draw is going to benefit first-time applicants far more than a bonus point system. So if you're applying in your first year, second year, you're much more likely if it's a random. A weighted bonus point is going to favor those that have been applying year after year and haven't drawn, so giving a little bit more preference to those who are in. But I can tell you that in any given year, you will have somebody in their very first year in this system draw a tag. Just luck. And you will have somebody with the most bonus points that won't. And that's just part of the process. But in general, it's designed to favor those that have been applying for year after year after year. As the director mentioned, one of the things the task force felt strongly was this isn't something we flipped the switch on today, because we do recognize that there are groups of high point holders, especially for moose and sheep, that given time could actually draw into the current system. And so we landed on this window of 4 years, looking at where that demarcation is of applicants, and figured if we wait 4 years to do this, those that have the highest points have a pretty darn good chance of drawing their permit if they apply. Now, that may not be the exact unit that they were thinking they were going to wait for, but actually drawing a permit. And so that really is the recommendation for the delay here, is let those folks who are deeply invested, have high points, generally are older, the opportunity to draw into the preference model. And then after 4 years, shift those all over to the weighted bonus point model. And so Madam Chair, that's a lot in a real quick overview. I'm happy to stand for any questions, and I just appreciate the time this morning.
Questions for President Schaefer? You must have done a great job. Thank you so much. I know we have Senator Hicks is here, who is also served quite a bit, well, actually the whole time, on the Wildlife Task Force. Do you have some comments, Senator Hicks, you'd like to make today? Okay, great. Any other questions for the director? Did a great job. Thank you for your work. All right, we'll go to public testimony then. Anybody in the room that would like to testify, come on up. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Garrett Falkenberg. You've heard from the previous gentlemen that are on the administrative end of this deal. I come to you as a sportsman. You couldn't hear me, huh? Yeah, I want to bury you. I'm too loud. I come to you as a sportsman and a participant in, 28-year participant in this drawing process. And I spoke to you, nearly all of you in Thermopolis, and I adamantly talked about, the availability to implement this bill without turning somebody's sports world hopes and dreams upside down. That adamantly, without a doubt, still holds true today. But I guess I come before you in the fact of going and asking for some sideboards and some sanity to this insanity, because these tags are so coveted and so hard to draw. And so I don't come before you as a sportsman trying to corner this thing to get one of these super coveted tags. I'm going to speak to you today pretty general, and I'll talk on the level for the people with a lot of points. I'll talk to the sportsmen that have medium points, and I'm going to talk to the newcomers, because it affects everybody. This really does. And so, but I brought a couple of deals that I didn't have last time I spoke with you. This came from the Game and Fish's webpage. I got it yesterday. This is, with our program presently in time, our bonus point system, and this is what's afforded to us. These are the data that we have the availability to look at as we as sportsmen to go down through. And I'll explain what these are. So this single sheet is the breakdown of how many points you have in relationship to how many applicants there are. So as you can see, left-hand column goes from 1 to 28. You move across to the next column. It says resident sportsman. It breaks it down into the number of applicants with those points. As you can see, and as the gentleman said before, 2,617 new applicants last year, where there at the other end, we're down to 10 resident sportsmen. Still in the running for whatever reason, they're still there. The other sheet, and let me back up a sec. And the second chart for your reference is the Moose breakdown on number of people, applicants, and the number. But I'm sorry this is so small. I couldn't get it enlarged, and I apologize for that. And then if you enlarged it, it chopped this other chart in half. But but it gives you a ref points and gives you an idea what we're talking about. And so, but for my talk today, I'll be referring back to the top chart, which is the bighorn sheep which also coincides with the stapled sheet that I have for you. Now, this stapled sheet this is kind of our holy grail for us sportsmen. This is what we go to our webpage. And by the way, application date's open right now. It opened the 3rd of January for these sheep, goat, moose. And this is what we go to. And so as you look through it, it tells you where, according to how many points you have, what your chances in an area or what the chances of drawing in an area are. And so I'll walk through it with you. Over here on the left-hand side column is your hunt area. Next column is it's a department. They call it the type, which essentially talks about the animal that you can hunt, which is going to be an any ram in nearly all hunt areas. The quota is going to be the number of permits that's going to be allocated in that area. The issued column will be the number of licenses that are issued, and in this case, where they're so coveted, there's way more applicants than there are licenses, so they're always issued. The preference points obviously are the applicants' preference points. Now, this is kind of the catchy part in the fact that, so at the very top, you notice even though there's applicants that have 28 points or 27 points, 26 points, none of those people drew. The top applicant had only 23 points. And so that's where, if we take this, open this can of insanity, those people that the 27, 28 timeframe are not going to have, they're going to lose their opportunity. They're going to lose their guarantee. Just because you square their points does not guarantee them a license anymore. And that's where I come to you guys for I think we need some sideboards on this thing. And so the other part of it is, when you look at this, how these people that are guaranteed a tag, you take the top off of this and make it a bonus point system, there's going to be no guarantees in it anymore. So you look back on your tag, you scan down through this. The gentleman, Dr. Nesbitt, talked about 21, 22 tag or points. You're in pretty good shape. You're going to go hunting in most general areas or most areas. Some of it might take a couple, 3 less points. Some of it might take a couple, 3 more. But we have a set of guidelines in place. And I told you before, I'm the most unlucky soul in the world. So when you jerk the lid off of this, all of a sudden, these guys have no more. And it takes at the present, it takes 21, 22 years to draw this. All of a sudden, we don't have any guidelines, no sideboards. It could now go to 30. It's kind of like shooting a shotgun at a piece of paper. You're going to have a BB that's going to hit way low, and that's going to be the first timer lucky dog, or it's going to be me up here at 35 years floundering around, and it's going to be, oh my goodness, well, what happens? And I think a lot of people will probably drop out of it. That's the bottom line. They're going to lose interest in it and fall out. So the medium group people, so they talked about 4 years to implement this. And so you take and look at this single sheet here for a second, if you would. So you take and look at that, 4 years to implement this. And I, by the way, took and added my quotas up this morning. We're issuing 109 tags per year of sheep tags, okay? So, and that doesn't include a governor's tag or the super tag or the trifecta tags, but it gives us a ballpark range of where we're at on this deal. So, but when you look at that over a 4-year period, I really seriously question whether we can get through them upper level people or not at a rate of 109 tags a year. And then when you bring the people that are down there 14 points and add 4 more points, now they're up at the 18. You heavy loaded this seriously, and you've totally, in my opinion, made total chaos of this mess. I really believe that. And so, but on the other side, then you go to the people with the low points. So, yeah, I realize it's not fair for them. They got to, you put in the time, you do the old saying goes, you do the time in order to do the crime, or vice versa, however that saying goes. But with this drawing, let me give you a little background. So 28 years ago, this was looked at both ways. The bonus system or the squared point system was looked at. And so we decided, the state of Wyoming, the legislature input, looked at going with present system that we have. It was implemented, but we all had the same starting point. Everybody was starting with 1 point. So it came back the following year, was brought to our attention, brought back the following year, that only people that had a snowball chance to draw were the people with the single points. And so that's where the 25% came in. It came in the following year, and it was important enough 28 years ago that we needed to give those people a opportunity to draw this. Now, all of a sudden, 28 years later, it's not an issue no more, and those people are being essentially cast by the wayside, is what it amounts to. And so I just think that we need to have, like I said, if we go out of here, if you remember nothing else that I say, that I think we need sideboards, we need some sanity to this insanity. There's no way that you can implement this without turning somebody's world totally upside down, the sports world. And I don't know, I just don't see it working. I really don't. For some people, yeah, it's gonna work. Some people, it just won't. I'm sorry, but, and with that, I'll close and certainly entertain any questions any of you might have.
Questions for Mr. Falkenberg from anyone on the committee?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Come on up. Go ahead and introduce yourself, even though, again, most of us probably know you.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bill Novotny. I'm with the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association. Wyoming Outfitters and Guides did have a seat at the table during this task force. Obviously, that's one seat. It is not necessarily always the broadest and fullest representation of our membership. In taking this recommendation from the task force back to our membership, I was given the instruction to come before you and actually share our opposition to this change. And that really lies in the uncertainty it's going to create with the long-term clients that our outfitters have built relationships over the years in working to get them to draw in Wyoming and come to Wyoming and have an experience. We don't in any way guarantee an outcome for those people, but we offer to them an experience to come here, hunt, fish, and recreate in Wyoming, and in the process leave millions of dollars and create thousands of jobs in Wyoming, directly or indirectly, because of a hunted experience here in the state. So we're very, very concerned what just the uncertainty this is going to create for our business model in looking at changes that you have recently done, whether it's moving to 90-10 or the once in a lifetime. These are additional shocks that we feel the system really hasn't had time to absorb and understand. And our members are working with their longtime clients who they continually try to increase their opportunity and always encourage them to purchase those points as a way to help increase the possibility that they would get a chance. So it's not a perfect system, but it's the system, unfortunately, that we're married to. I don't think you can underscore the fact that we really don't know what is going to happen when you lose or change that preference point income that's coming into the game and fish. That's a valuable component within their overall budget. So unfortunately, we just cannot come to you today and ask you to move this bill forward. But certainly it does not in any way downplay our support in the work that was done of the task force and certainly the consideration of the other bills that the task force is going to put forth during this session. I guess I would also say just welcome the new senator to the committee and Senator, the Outfitters and Guides Association. We're the trade association for the industry. We've been in business since the late 1950s. The oversight board is another entity that is appointed by the governor. So sometimes we get confused with that, but we are the trade association. So with that, Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'd stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much for your testimony. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify on this bill? Well, I know we have some folks online. So, oh, was there somebody else coming up? Oh, Senator Hicks, okay. Changed his mind. Welcome, Senator, Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, just a couple of points that I think that were raised that I wanted to point out is the circumstances on the ground has changed. And I was a strong advocate of this. I lobbied for the preference points 28 years ago in this body as a passionate sportsman, but the circumstances has changed. And what worked 28 years ago and 20 years ago doesn't work today. And so the circumstances that have primarily changed, in 1990, we issued 300 sheep permits in the state of Wyoming. I think last year, if you count the residents and non-residents, it was just a little over 160. Had we still issued 300 sheep permits today, this system would work. You do have an increasing demand, but you have a decreasing supply. And the exact same thing has happened with moose. And so this is not something I was an advocate for going into. I've always been a proponent of a pressman point system, but when you run through the mathematics on it and you model the statistics and use the actual data, it leads you to the foregone conclusion that if we don't change this, that the new entrants into the system are never going to have an opportunity to participate other than if you look at those random odds, less than 1% chance of drawing, and that's 1% every year. So the probability is if you apply for 99 years, every year you apply, you still only have a 1% chance. And so again, I went into this thing married to the old system because I had lobbied for the system and worked hard for the system, but you come to the reality that the system that we had doesn't work in the changing circumstances of declining supply. And so it kind of convinced me that there is no perfect system. There is absolutely no perfect system, but this is what I would call the most reasonable, equitable, and fair system that's out there. And to speak to a little bit of issue, this was not something that we created in the task force. The state of Nevada has used a weighted bonus point, which is a weighted random draw for over 20 years. Montana did a very similar thing. They converted over about 4 or 5 years ago from a straight preference to a weighted bonus point system. South Dakota has done this. So we looked at every single one of those states, and every single state is at some point in time looking at altering some of their draw systems because of just the changing circumstances on the ground. You're going to have proponents for and against. But I'm telling you, we probably spent more time on the task force on this than I would say is, if not the number one, it was the second most thing. And we looked at every potential alternative out there. Every system that's been created, some that were presented by the public that quite frankly, I thought had a lot of merits. But because of the complexity and the changing circumstances and the number of people that are very passionate about this, from all perspectives, again, we come back and settled on this in my own estimation, again, and I'm not a proponent of this system, but I'm a proponent of fairness, equitable, and coming to the realization that this is probably the system that will serve the best. And so with that, Madam Chairman, I just wanted to, add those words, the work that the task force put in this, and it's not an easy decision that we came to, but it was the decision that we arrived that probably does the best for the most. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Questions for Senator Hicks? I have one, just real quick one before you leave. Just wondering, with the 4-year transition, I started wondering about I think President Schaefer maybe talked about the average age of the hunter, or maybe it was Director Nesvik, but the average age of those guys at the top, those 4 years, what would that be? Do you have any idea? on those folks that are putting in
Most of those people are in their 60s and 70s.
60s and 70s.
You know, and one other point, Madam Chairman, when we talk about the maximum point holders, and I think Garrett did a good job of explaining, you know, what it is. And so what we see in the demographics there is it doesn't take 27 points to draw a sheep. There's not a single unit in the state of Wyoming that takes max points for the most part. You have some people that just accumulate them because the point system allows them to plan, so they'll go next year. And that was the 4-year buffer. Use your points, don't just accumulate points. The other thing that you see that's unique is people are married to units, and that's a personal decision. So I think last year I was talking to Senator Baldwin early. There was moose areas in the state of Wyoming. It only took 12 or 14 points for a resident to draw. But you look at that, there's over 300 or 400 people that have more points than that. And you say, well, why didn't they go moose hunting? Because they chose not to. They chose to say, I am not going to go moose hunting. I am only going to go moose hunting in this area here. That is a personal choice. The opportunity is there for less than those maximum point holders. So when you get in and you start analyzing the data, there's a lot of nuanced stuff in there that you say, look, why are all these people not going moose hunting? And it's because they have a favorite unit. It's in their backyard, or they're just diehard. I'm only going to hunt the very best of the best of the best in Wyoming, and I'll hold out forever. That's a personal choice. And I just think it's not fair to allow somebody's personal choice to interfere with the greatest good for the most hunters. And so just something to consider in your deliberations, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Senator Hicks. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify today? All right. I think we have some folks online, right?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Rusty Bell.
Okay. Go ahead and let him in. Good morning, Mr. Bell. Go ahead. Can you hear us?
Madam Chair, it was buffering for some reason. I apologize. I didn't hear you. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Rusty Bell. I was the co-chair for the task force, and just taking some notes off of some of the things. I think President Schaefer and Majority Floor Leader Hicks and Director Nesvik did a really good job talking about this bill. I don't think I could have done any better. And so thank you guys that were on that task force for doing that. Just a couple things, and Senator Hicks mentioned it, but there are a lot of areas out there that actually don't have a random tag, just because of the amount of tags. It has to be a certain threshold before there's a random tag. So there are several areas out there that don't have a random tag. And so that 25%, it really doesn't, it doesn't take into account those areas. And so that goes to the choice that people have on where they're going to send in for. Another couple things, Madam Chair, that I just wanted to talk about was, our task force did spend a considerable amount of time on this. I think you've asked me in the past, this bill, this direction from our task force, actually, the vote was 16-2 with the two dissenting folks. One of those, and I'm not going to speak for him, but certainly Mr. Hagan, that Dwayne, him and I and President Schaefer attended a meeting in Cody here not too long ago. And he talked about why he dissented and that, this at least gives a chance in the future, and that this is a system that currently just doesn't work. And it works for the next few years. And then this bubble that we're going to see, it is going to push those preference points very, very high. And so I don't know that I can talk any more than what the other task force members did. I can certainly answer some questions on the makeup of the task force. I thought that the outfitters were very, very well represented on our not only in the audience, and we took more testimony from certainly the outfitters during that 18-month process, probably in the room, than we did anyone. But we certainly did take into account their concerns during this whole process. So I appreciate the time you've given me, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Bell? Yeah, I have one, just real quickly. I appreciate you mentioning the makeup of the task force, because after looking at the makeup, I thought it was very diverse. The sportsmen that were on the task force, did they see any downsides of this, or the outfitters, in terms of switching from the random, or I mean, the preference to the random?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Certainly the comments that we got mostly that were in opposition to this language would have been certainly those non-resident folks. And one of the reasons was, not only have we changed the 90-10, that given 90% of those tags to residents here last session. And so that's taken away some of those tags to those folks, but they really do like that predictability. And that's where we tried to put in that waiting period. And, we did the best we could with that 2027 start date. Certainly the longer you put this out, we're going to start to see that those numbers increase more and more. That sheet that I think Mr. Falkenberg had given you, you're going to start seeing those numbers creep in. They're just going to go up. I mean, we know that, we can predict that. I think that modeling just shows that there isn't a good system here. And like Senator Hicks said, we explored systems that honestly were very complex, maybe made a lot of sense, but very, very complex, hard to understand. And we spent a lot of time on this with 18 members. I would say hundreds of hours, certainly thousands of comments. And so, I wish there was a perfect system out there that would work for everybody. I wish there was another 1,000 moose tags and another 1,000 sheep tags. That's just not the case, but certainly we do know that there's thousands more people that want those tags. So anyway, I don't know if that totally answered your question, but I did the best I could.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin has a question for you.
Good morning, Mr. Bell. Just a quick question for you. And you mentioned the attendance and the input by the outfitters. I'm just curious, across those 18 meetings, what kind of public input, or not just input, but attendance at the meetings? What kind of public attendance did you have? Was it good? Was it mediocre? Or was it like a lot of our public meetings, it was very mediocre? You got a lot of written stuff, but how was the public attendance at those meetings?
Madam Chair, Senator Baldwin, great question. Very well attended, very well attended. Most of our meetings were in Casper. We also had the Zoom option. I would say that there was, some of our meetings went 2 days, and certainly certain times of the day there would be less or more, but we had, I would say that by far the folks that were in the room mostly were outfitters, and then certainly a lot of sports persons, and Mr. Magagna was in there. I think I see him in the room too, but he was there quite often. But we had a lot. Sometimes I think we had 50 or 60 people in the audience. We also made it a point to take comments multiple times during each day, every day, and then I'll put those comments out, on our website to take for until the next meeting. So we did take. We had good attendance, and did take a lot of public comment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Any other questions for Mr. Bell? Thank you so much for your testimony and for all of your work. I know it's a lot of time for all of you that served on that task force, so thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Do we have, Emily, I think we have somebody else in there, or maybe a couple somebodies?
Yes, Chairman, we have Joe Sandrini, and there's also a handout at
Okay.
your podium.
Go ahead and let him in the room then. Might be this one. Welcome, Mr. Sandrini. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Madam Chairman. Thank you. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to be able to comment this morning. I'm Joe Sandrini from Weston County. I live about 10 miles north of Newcastle, and I'm an avid hunter. I probably have worse luck than Mr. Falkenberg. The area we have to hunt here, elk, it's a great area. I've drawn one tag in 15 years, and that's with a 33% chance of drawing every year. And so I just asked you to keep that number in mind there for a minute. I also currently have 22 preference points. So if this bill passes as written, there's probably a chance that I'll draw a tag and be able to go sheep hunting in the next few years. And so really my comments aren't about me. It's about what hunters will actually get versus what they think they may be getting with this. So when I was first presented with this weighted bonus point system, I thought it would be a benefit, but then I did the math. And there is a handout there for y'all. And if you don't mind, maybe we could walk through it. And this is a very simplified version of the squared bonus point system. There's one assumption I have in there. I didn't realize that you also got one chance in the drawing for your just putting in along with your points. But if we go through this, a way to really think about it is it's kind of like we're at an Elk Foundation banquet and we're having a raffle and we have raffle tickets. So that first column there is the number of points that people have, okay? And the second column is the number of applicants. So that's the number of people with that many points. If we go to the third column, that's the number of entries that each of those persons would have in the draw. So for example, if I had 10 points, I would have I'd have 100 raffle tickets in the drawing. Actually, it'd be 101, I guess, because I didn't understand the system totally, but that really doesn't change the odds significantly. So then if you go to the next column, that total draw entries, that is the number of raffle tickets that each person with a said number of points has in there. So for example, the folks with 10 points, there's a total of 3,487 raffle tickets in there for the folks that have 10 points. Now, if we move over to the far right-hand column, the draw odds, those are actually the draw odds of drawing the tag. And the way this is set up is that there's one license available, and then the number of applicants, which each number of points, I started with 100, and they're decreased by 10% as you go through. So there's a total of 891 applicants for the one license. So at the very bottom there, you'll see the draw odds, which are 1 in 891, which is about 0.1% chance of drawing. If we look at the folks with the maximum number of points, with 20 points, their odds of drawing the tag are about 2/3%. And admittedly, there's a lot of assumptions built in here, and it's not modeling. I mean, Weatherman model, other folks model. Your models are as good as your assumptions. This is simply a snapshot in time. This is our night at the banquet. This is the drawing. If we go to the second page, here, what I've done is I've cubed the number of points. And this is what South Dakota, for example, does. So the number of points are cubed. And again, if you look through here, the folks with the maximum number of points have just under a 1% chance of drawing. Now that's a lot better than the folks with 0 or no points who are down in the like 1/100% chance. But how much money do you want to spend to up your odds from, 1/100th or 0.1% of a percentage point up to still less than 1% chance of drawing? What's interesting here too, and it holds for the first example as well, is that simply to get to have what the draw odds would be if they're random. So in order for me to have random draw odds, if it was a completely random draw, no bonus points, I would need 9 or 10 years of points to simply have the same amount of chance if it was completely random. And so that concerns me a little bit. If we go to the third page, what I've done here is I went on the Game and Fish website a couple days ago and was looking at the draw odds. And this is for Bighorn Sheep Area 17, and there were 6 licenses available. There were 6 people with maximum points that had applied, and something like 624 with less than maximum. I was unable to determine exactly how many folks had how many points. So I took and using a percentage drop-off factor, back calculated so that we had the total number of applicants equal, in this example, to the total number of applicants that Game and Fish had, which in this case was 630. So if it was a completely random draw with 6 applicants, or with 6 tags, and with 630 applicants, folks would have just under a 1% chance of drawing. So now what I did is I put in with the points, and so the person with the maximum points that I'd put in was 25. And so basically did the math the same as the other way on the other examples. And so if you move across to that column that says draw odds first tag, that's the odds of folks with the preference or bonus points, however many they have, their odds of drawing. So a person with maximum bonus points, 25, had a 0.97% chance of drawing, which isn't a lot better than a completely random draw at 0.95% of a chance. Now, as you go to the second, third, fourth tags, of course, you're going to be removing people from that draw. And so if, for example, say somebody with 1 point drew that first tag, it wouldn't change things very much. If somebody with a maximum number of points drew that first tag, it would increase the draw odds on the second tag to just barely over 1%, 1.03%. So what this, again, and these examples are just a snapshot in time. They're our night at the RMEF banquet trying to win a gun or whatever, in this case, trying to win a sheep hunt. And again, there's assumptions brought in, but the average hunter isn't going to be thinking about, okay, what are my modeled chances through time? Because every year is an independent draw. So the draw odds for that year are the draw odds for that year. They're not cumulative. It's not, I didn't draw last year, so I'm going to have a better chance this year. I will with more points, although minusculely more. I mean, it's negligible. How much difference in reality is a 0.1% chance of drawing and even a 2% chance of drawing? It's not a lot. And so when we consider those things, it does incentivize people to put in without very many points. And that draws more people into the drawing, which is fine. If it was a completely random draw, the average age of the person drawing the tag would be completely random, so it would be in proportion to the age of the applicants, okay? And as far as equity goes, if you wanted a truly equal system, you would want a completely random draw. With the current system, there is point creep. It's built into the system. But now we do have once in a lifetime licenses for ram, bighorn sheep, and moose, and a 90% of those tags going to residents. And so, yes, it's a limited resource. There's more and more people wanting to exploit that limited resource. But yeah, life isn't fair, and probably perhaps the most fair thing is a completely random draw. I guess just to summarize this, the best example that I have is this whole thing is kind of like buying a used car. Here we are at the car lot. We have this used car. It looks shiny. It's well kept up. Man, that looks like a neat deal. I'm interested in it. Well, we pop the hood and look under it, and maybe we test drive it, and we say, well, this doesn't really have the muscle to do what we want, but it seems like a really good deal, so we're going to take it. And then, unfortunately, after we drive it for a few years, we realize, yeah, it wasn't really what we wanted or expected. And the reason I say that is because even with the weighted bonus points, those folks that are in there year after year after year, they're not really gaining that much of an advantage. And especially when we talk about our non-residents who are paying money every year to build up those points, what are they gaining with the money they're paying? They're not. I mean, statistically speaking, they're not gaining a huge advantage. So like I say, I'm just basically kind of presenting my take on this. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Anyone on the committee have questions for Mr. Sandrini? I don't see any. Thank you so much for your testimony and for all of your work. Gives us a different perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Madam Chairman.
Anyone else in the room? No? I thought we had one more, but maybe not, huh? Okay, all right. So with that, unless there's anybody else here in the room that's come in that would like to testify, I think we'll close public testimony. Committee, you've heard a lot of testimony this morning. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Move the bill. Okay. It's moved by Senator Guru, seconded by Senator Baldwin. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bill and page by page, and if there's any issues or any amendments or anything, please let me know. Start with page 1. Page 2 basically just has bonus points. Page 3, same thing, just has bonus points put in there instead of preference points. Page 4, there's a little bit of extra down at the bottom there, but just talks about squaring the points plus adding the 1. Anything on page 5? Page 6. Just specifies a moose or ram, bighorn sheep. That's pretty much all that page does. Page 7. Okay, it adds in a little bit there about antelope, deer, and elk at the top. Page 8. Again, talks about bonus point programs for non-resident ram, bighorn sheep, and non-resident moose. Page 9. Just more bonus points added in instead of preference points. Page 10. Okay, no amendments. Page 11. All right. Discussion. Senator Baldwin.
I hate sitting here being so quiet. The reason I asked a question about the public input is I'm curious how much input the average sportsman has put into this. It sounds like it was quite a bit. I was unable to attend one, but that was my interest, and I hear that in my other committee about how much public input there is. I have a feeling that we heard it through those Sportsmen's Association, but it sounds like there were a lot of actual sportsmen at the meetings as well as in line. I know some. And that was my curiosity. And here in the room, I'm curious that we haven't heard more comments or more discussion with all the people that were here. I expected a lot more, quite frankly. That being said, it feels like there's a lot of support out there in the community. There'll always be some who don't support it, who, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. There's always detractors, but it feels like there's a majority that support this, and for that reason, I believe I will be a yes vote.
Other comments? Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, I apologize for my intermittent attendance. Other duties, I just get conflicts, and we talked about it in the beginning, and I appreciate your sufferance with that. Onto this bill, for the second time, going into this process, I was not sold on this plan. But I did go to some of the meetings and I did watch some of the others, and I too kind of have turned a bit based on the amount of people that showed up. The amount of participation was very robust. Things that resonated with me, just in case you wanted some takeaways. The things that resonated with me was, let's say the process and how rigorous it was. But then as far as what people said, the last gentleman who spoke said, it was a car analogy. If this doesn't work, we can change it. And tried it for a few years and give it a whirl. The other thing was from the majority floor leader and this came out every word I heard, or a lot what most folks said, is this system is broken, and that this is an attempt to fix it. So I too will be voting for this today in an attempt to see to fix it, but we'll be watching most carefully. I have a lot of outfitters in my in my district, and I'm gonna hear from them. And I'm also gonna tell them I'm gonna be watching, and I know they're gonna be letting me know if the things are amiss. So with that, I just wanted to say thank everyone, thank the department, and thank all the people that got involved, that really stood up to get involved with this. I think it's been a great effort. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other comments? I would just like to say also that I jumped on a couple of the meetings and listened to the testimony. And I was very impressed with how many of the folks, not only on the committee, we're all, looking for the best possible solution, I think, to the fact that we have fewer tags and we have a lot more folks that want to hunt moose and bighorn sheep. I know in my own family, I had a couple of extended family members that decided to kind of give up on putting in for moose because they said, we're just never, we're going to be too old by the time we get a chance. So I think they were very interested in seeing what the Wildlife Task Force came up with. And I think of all the task force, I've served on a couple that this one, you guys put in an inordinate amount of work. And I appreciate that, appreciate the director and all of his staff. And I also appreciate the fact that you extended, a survey to the public. And I think there were over like 9,000 folks that sent back surveys, and that was meaningful to me. So obviously there was a lot of interest and a lot of folks that felt like that this was something worth taking a look at and seeing if we could do better than what we have with the preference system. So with that, I think, are we ready for the question? All right, let's go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senate File 88, hunting license, weighted bonus point system. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Garou.
Aye.
Senator Jones.
Aye.
And Chairman Schuler.
Aye,
We have 5 ayes.
5 ayes, that has passed, and we will send it to the floor.
Who would you like to present it, Madam Chair?
Who would like to? I think I could if no one else would like to volunteer.
Maybe ask the majority floor leaders.
Yeah, if the majority floor leader, he actually mentioned that he might.
Senator
So
Hicks?
it'll either be he or I.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your input and your information on this bill. I know it was a lot of work done, so I do believe we have some time. We can go ahead and head on to the next bill. I think we've got time, and it is Senate File 56, prohibiting travel across private land for hunting purposes. So again, I would assume we would call up our agency folks and
Madam Chair, we have Representative Crago that would
Okay.
like to speak.
perfect. Representative Pago, welcome.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Happy to be here today, committee members. Here today on behalf of Joint Judiciary. We worked this bill throughout the interim. Prior to that, it was actually an individual bill. I happen to know the person who brought it the first time around, and we then worked it through the interim. Essentially, this bill, it's pretty simple, straightforward. What we were trying to do is address a problem so that our good game and fish wardens could actually issue trespassing tickets when someone was not in the act of actually hunting on private property. And so this bill just adds a couple words through the current hunting trespass statute. We worked it extensively. We had lots of comments, lots of good ideas come. We changed the language back and forth. We made sure that it did not really address the corner crossing issue. It doesn't delve into that. It avoids that completely. We worked with our partners at Game and Fish to get the language right. I think they may have a simple amendment they'd like you to look at today. They're going to talk to you about that when they get up here. We also worked with landowners, sportsmen, took consideration from all of them. I think there's a general consensus that it's a good idea, because at the end of the day, the Game and Fish wardens are the people that are in the field during hunting seasons, hunting the various hunting seasons, and it's often hard to get the sheriff's deputies out in the field to issue a criminal trespass ticket. They're often 2 hours away. I know where I am, that's usually the case. They're usually more than 2 hours away because they're off doing something else, when the game wardens are actually right there and would be able to address this problem. And I think one of the reasons there's broad consensus is the sportsmen don't believe they should be trespassing on private property either. And this is a way to help solve that problem and maybe bring these groups together. It's in everybody's idea. I think they'll testify. Won't speak for them all, but that it's a good way to help start solving that problem that we're all seeing more and more of every day. And I'd answer any questions the committee may have.
Questions? Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I could take a guess at why there's extra language on the bottom of page 1, line 15. To take wildlife is a distinct activity from hunting and fishing, but just wanted to know what the discussion was during the interim of why that extra language was needed.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Ellis. So that is a term of art within the game and fish statutes, as you all probably know, whereas hunt is not technically defined. It includes that. And I think that was I can't remember if Game and Fish brought that amendment or if it was one of the committee members, but it was just essentially another way of making sure it's broad enough and that we don't have any ambiguities left within the statute when we're done.
Follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
So the question I'd have is, Representative, do we need to take out the word hunt?
Go ahead, Representative.
If taking wildlife includes hunting?
Representative?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Ellis, I think that'd be a good question for our good representatives from Game and Fish Department. At the time when we discussed that, they did not think we needed to take it out, that adding that in was okay without taking out the word hunt. Thank you.
Other questions? Sure, Representative? Okay, thank you for your work on this. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Game and Fish.
Good morning again, Madam Chair. I'm going to have our Chief Game Warden, Rick King, talk to you about this bill and hopefully answer some of those questions.
Welcome, Mr. King.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rick King. I'm the Chief Game Warden and Chief of the Wildlife Division for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. As Representative Crago mentioned, this bill was discussed during the interim Judiciary Committee. And I think it was really born out of some frustration that a lot of folks were expressing to probably many legislators, in that there seems to be a number of trespass cases that come up where there's a little bit of ambiguity about whose responsibility that is to address it, whether it's addressed in Title 23 by Game and Fish game wardens or Title 6 under the criminal code with sheriff deputies. And so this language really was meant to resolve some of that and to clarify that when a person is trespassing, they actually leave boot prints on deeded ground, a horse print on deeded ground, or ATV tracks on deeded ground, and that activity was associated with a hunt or fishing or trapping or collecting shed antlers, that those violations could be dealt with by game and fish wardens. I think there's probably, I can give two examples, one a hypothetical example and one a real world example, to where it may help illustrate some of the issues that I think this is trying to resolve. So for example, a real world situation, we had a case, I'll leave out all the details, just give you the gist of the story, but we had several hunters that were hunting elk in an area that's much like most of Wyoming, where it's a mix of public and private land. They were using ATVs, and during the course of their hunt, they were traveling and had crossed back and forth between public land and private land. They didn't have permission to be on that private land. And over the course of the hunt, one hunter actually ended up harvesting an elk. It was on private property. They were issued a citation for trespassing. That citation stood in court and they were found guilty. Another member of the party was issued a trespassing citation because clearly they had been on deeded land during the course of that entire day's hunt. That citation for trespassing was dismissed. They hadn't actually killed an elk, but we felt like it had met the standards of trespassing under Title 23. In that case, it was dismissed in that the judge essentially said that under Title 23, a person has to actually hunt on that private deeded land. that was in question. So I think this helps clarify some of those scenarios. One hypothetical example that is becoming more and more common is that with today's technology, GPS units, mapping software that you can utilize your cell phone for, a person can navigate around and stay on public land, even in those areas of the state where it's very intermixed with public and private land. A scenario could be where a person stays on public land, actually harvests an animal on public land, but then decides to take a shortcut home and travels across private property to take a shortcut back to the vehicle. In that scenario, this bill would help clean up the fact that that really is part of the hunting activity and should be addressed under Title 23. I think I'll stop there. Again, I think this is designed to address that frustration that occurs at many levels, especially at the landowner level, but there are frustrations with this from the game warden in the field who's trying to carry out his job, sportsmen who are trying to do the right thing and represent the hunting public well. And then again, like I said, especially at the landowner level who they have a legitimate trespass concern, they just want it dealt with. I do have one amendment. I talked to Representative Crago. My apologies to him. I brought this forward just at the last minute, but I do have one suggested amendment that I think would help clarify some of this intent, and at the appropriate time, I'd be happy to discuss that with you.
Questions for Mr. King?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to refer back to what I asked Representative Crago with the insertion of the word "to take wildlife" and then the word "hunt." Is that included? Was hunt to be? Do we need the word "hunt" in there still if we add "to take"?
Go ahead, Mr. King.
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, you're correct. So in statute in Title 23, take is defined as hunt, catch, capture, pursue, et cetera, or an attempt to do all that. So I do think you're probably correct in that word is a bit redundant. And that was the genesis of adding the word take into this bill, was it because it was defined in statute. It made a lot of sense to keep it consistent and use the word take.
Another follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, thanks.
So on page 2, line 6, you also talk about the driving through or actually physically touching the land. But then you talked about people that ride horses that maybe are doing this activity. And I'm worried that no one really refers to riding horses as driving. So do we need to make an amendment or think about it? Just clarifying riding a horse or some kind of language.
Mr. King?
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I'm glad you brought up that question because that's exactly the amendment that I'd like to discuss, is to clarify just that issue.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Let's go ahead and, go ahead, Director.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I might add just a little bit here too. So if you look back decades, there was a day when it was fairly common that the court's interpretation was existing statute covered this activity, and many folks were charged and convicted for engaging in the activity that the chief just talked about here under Title 23. It's only over the last 10, 15 years where courts have taken a little different approach. Some courts, I think this language clears it up and gives some guidance to the courts. And the only other thing I would say is, knowing Wyoming sportsmen, the overwhelming majority of Wyoming sportsmen believe that it's illegal to do exactly what we're talking about. They avoid going on to deeded ground, whether they're planning to hunt there or not. They know it's not right to cross somebody else's property without permission. This clarifies who has the jurisdiction to enforce that illegal activity.
Thank you, Director. Questions for the Director? I just have one, and again, it's just a general question. Do we feel like we have enough game wardens in the state to do what we need to do with this bill? Put you on the spot there.
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Our game wardens work extremely hard. We are shorthanded right now. For the first time in my 25-year career, we have open vacant districts. We're trying very hard to recruit to fill those vacancies. I think, even when we are successful in filling all those, we still end up with a profession that requires a lot of time and a lot of commitment and a lot of work. So the long answer to your question is no, I don't think we do have enough. Our folks are working pretty hard.
Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and,
Madam Chair?
go ahead, Ms. Senator Ellis.
Madam Chair, I apologize. What was the proposed amendment, the riding on a horse on page 6? I was just curious what your thought was.
Go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, if I can, I'll hand out this amendment and then talk through it.
Perfect. I'm better if I can see it. Let's go ahead and take a look at that amendment then. Go ahead, Mr. King.
Madam Chair, thank you. So the proposed amendment that we would offer for your consideration is that on page 2, line 6, we would suggest striking the word requires and then insert the following. And I'll just read this how it would read if this amendment was taken. So it'd say, for the purposes of this subsection, travel through or return across is defined as physically touching the surface of the private property by foot, vehicle, livestock, or any other means of surface contact. And our intent there was to address just what Senator Ellis brought up, is that you may be crossing that on an ATV, a snow machine, or horseback. And this, I think, would help clarify for our folks what the intent is.
Questions on the amendment or discussion on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment? Oh, yeah, I've got to move it first. Sorry. Yeah, we got to work the bill. Sorry, jumped the gun here. I was so excited to get that amendment in there. So I think that amendment makes sense. Thank you for that. Is there any other testimony? Come on up, Jim. Welcome, Mr. Magagna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim McGaggan with the Wyoming Stock Growers Association and also representing the Wyoming Wool Growers Association today. I won't repeat much of what's been said. The reasons that Representative Craigle pointed out, as well as the director and the chief, are the reasons that we've been very supportive behind this bill, create some consistency with our trespass laws that are in Title VI. And the other thing I would mention is that most of our landowner members across the state have a good relationship with their game wardens. They work together, they collaborate, and especially during hunting seasons, but even at other times of the year, that's the natural place for them to go if they become aware of a trespass taking place on their land. It's just much easier to do than if to reach out to a county sheriff, which might not be in the area of that. So it will make this process work much better, and for that reason, we fully support the bill and support the amendment as well. Although I will say that when I saw the amendment, I had to question riding livestock because it brought an image to me of someone sitting on the back of a cow or a sheep going out hunting. But I understand why that's in there, and it's consistent with the use of the term livestock in other places in the statute. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Magagna? No? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Others in the room? Go ahead,
Madam
introduce
Chair,
yourself.
members of the committee, I'm Jess Johnson. I'm with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And I wanted to sort of stand in support of this and also reference back to the representative who brought this forward and his discussion about this going towards helping start to bridge the gap between hunters and landowners. As we have seen, that has been getting wider and wider. And it's something that I think we're very invested in being part of that bridge. So we do stand in support of this bill. And I would say that there's a lot more work to be done on both the hunting and landowner side to build this bridge. And I'm hoping that we see some more of those bills this session and that it's approached in a way that we all can sit down and agree and do the work together. This is a great start, and it's something we're really happy to support.
Questions for Ms. Johnson? Thank you for your testimony. Come on up. Anybody else? We could do a double whammy there. Sure.
We'll go to the one that's already on.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Sabrina King. I am the lobbyist for the Wyoming chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Our chapter's been around for about a decade, and we represent thousands of hunters who frankly spend most of their time on public land deep in the backcountry. And I think in the process of this bill, and I think having conversations with the original bill sponsor when this first came up, there were some concerns about, is this sort of a backdoor into addressing corner crossing? Over the course of the past year, with the Interim Judiciary Committee and all of the conversations that we've had, and in particular putting in this definition of traveling through, we feel like we've avoided some of those questions and concerns. And I think, as was mentioned by the previous testifier, is also our organization's goal over the course of this legislature, but really moving into the interim and moving forward, providing more clarity, both for hunters and for landowners, about how we interact in the field, because we are seeing more conflict. And I think part of that is born out of lack of clarity in the law. There are some hard conversations we have to have, but I think there's some easy conversations like this one where we can really kind of come to a solution. One other thing that I wanted to just mention in terms of this bill, and I think the importance of this definition, and we support sort of the amended definition, is the title, and I think a lot of the conversation around this bill has been about hunting, but as you can see in the text, it also addresses fishing. And under state law right now, and again, one of the original questions about this bill is, when you are on public waters of the state, you may very well be floating through private land. You can be on those waters, but you can't get out of your boat and stand up and put your foot down on the surface. So it really is important to sort of have that nexus of physically touching, whether on foot or whatever else. So that addressed, and this definition addresses a lot of the concerns of anglers that existed in the original bill where there wasn't that definition. So as it's written with that amendment, we support this bill, and I think there will be plenty of conversations in this legislature about trespass. So hopefully this is the one of the easy ones. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. King? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Welcome back, Mr. Novotny.
Good morning, and Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, Bill Novotny with the Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association, and we stand in a very strong support of this bill. We think it was a very thoughtful approach to address an issue that oftentimes it's my outfitters and guides who come into contact with individuals who are involved in trespass. Outfitters provide valuable secondary income to farmers and ranchers across Wyoming to have the ability to operate a business on their private property. And so in many instances, they would have these interactions with individuals clearly breaking the law, and there was no recourse. And we really believe that every effort was made to make sure that we were not doing anything to deny people access, that we were not putting any undue burdens on the department, but really adopted a thoughtful approach that, as has been mentioned before, has nothing to do with the discussion over corner crossing. This is people that are clearly trespassing on land to engage. And we also appreciate that there's been some discussion about people that are shed collecting, because that has become a very profitable cottage industry where people from out of state actually follow the shed seasons and come in here, and it has lasting impact on our wildlife herds, disturbing them a lot of times in a critical time where they need to be left alone. So again, we would ask you to, with this great amendment that's come from the department, that you move this forward with your favorable consideration. And I'd answer any questions you might have this morning.
Questions for Mr. Novotny? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Come on up.
Madam Chairwoman, Committee, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. I really appreciate this bill. I really appreciate the amendment. Great bill, and without trying my best to be uncharacteristically brief, I will sit in support of this bill, and with that, Chairwoman Schuler, I would sit for any questions you may have for me.
Questions for Mr. Moline? It's your lucky day. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
For your support. Welcome and introduce yourself, please.
My name, is this thing working?
Ship the green
Okay.
lights on, you're good.
Is this thing working?
We
Okay.
can hear
My
you.
name is Alex Bowler. I'm a landowner in Laramie County. I support the bill 100%. I do have one question for the committee and/or the judiciary interim, and that question is, given the last sentence in this bill, would it be possible for an ordinary human being to infer that a corner crossing does not constitute trespassing? Would that be a reasonable inference?
Anyone want to answer that question? It's a good question.
This is a very serious issue because corner crossing enables the public to access millions of acres of public land. To say that a landowner owns the airspace above his property is ridiculous. So we really need to understand whether this bill, either as it stands or as it was amended, would rule out corner crossing as trespassing.
Mr. Nesbitt, did you want to, our director? You might have an answer for this.
I'm gonna do my best here, Madam Chair, to address this gentleman's question. So I think we're talking two completely separate issues. I think this bill does not contemplate, or could it be interpreted to infer that this is dealing with that question, the legal question of the airspace over a corner. This bill specifically talks about, as the chief pointed out, leaving a footprint, a tire track, a horse print on deeded ground. The corner crossing issue, I think, is contemplating airspace over the corner or over a corner. So I don't believe a court would interpret this as prohibiting corner crossing.
Thank you for that clarification. Hopefully that answers your question.
I'd be happy to answer
Okay.
any questions.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. One more? Welcome and introduce yourself, please.
Madam Chair, Committee, Nick Dobrich, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership out of Du Bois. We're a sportsman's conservation group, and we also support this this bill, and we appreciate the work that was done within interim from last year to now to clarify the exact issue that was just brought to your attention. As you heard, the majority of hunters don't want to trespass, and a few bad actors really shed a bad light on some bad actors could shed a bad light on the hunting community, so this helps address that. One additional thing, it was brought to your attention, the modern technology now with smartphone GPS applications, and when you pull up like OnX, for example, you're very clearly able to see if you're on private or public land. What's missing in a lot of components is the easements, so legal easements through private land. And I brought this to some of the committee's attention, this exact issue. It's been addressed at the federal level last year with support from both Senator Barrasso and Senator Lummis. And some counties are addressing it as well. There seems to be some room for improvement for state-held easements. So I'll leave it at that. And it's something that I think could not only benefit the public, but also landowners to ensure that when there are easements in people's backyards, that people aren't unwittingly not trespassing through those. So I will stand for any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Dobrich? Well, thank you for bringing up that. I think that's a very valid point with the easements. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Any other testimony from the room? Do we have anybody online?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Christy Thompson.
Okay, go ahead and let her in. Maybe.
Ms. Thompson, if you're available, please press OK on your screen to join as a panelist. Thank you.
Okay. Give her about another minute here and. Sounds like maybe she's not there, so. All right, if there's no other testimony, we'll go ahead and close public testimony and we'll work the bill. I guess we have to have someone move the bill first. Senator Baldwin moved the bill. Second by Senator Grew. All right, let's take a look at page 1. We're okay with the language at the bottom. Okay, great. Page 2.
Madam Chair, I move on
Somewhere
line
else?
1, or page 2, line 1, to strike the word hunt
Hunt, okay,
and the comma.
and the comma. Okay. Questions about that? Okay. Anything else on page 2?
We don't vote on that one.
Oh, yeah, we better. All those in favor of striking the word hunt on page 2, line 1, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, 1 no. That has been approved. How about anything else? Amendment? We ready for the amendment then?
Madam Chair, I move on page 2, line 6, we delete the word, sorry. I can't see.
Requires.
Requires, there it is.
That's right there.
Delete the word requires and then insert the definition provided by Game and Fish, which is defined as physically touching the surface of the private property by foot, vehicle, livestock, or any other means of surface contact.
Okay, discussion on that?
And
Oh,
to
sorry.
clarify, I apologize, beginning on line 6, strike the remainder of the language and then insert what was proposed.
Okay. Comments on that amendment? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We probably need to have it a little bit bigger, font. I think we're struggling with that small. Sorry, Mr. King. All right, that's been approved. Anything else on the bill? Okay, question on the bill. Go ahead and call roll.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senate File 56, prohibiting travel across private land for hunting purposes. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Jones. And Chairman Schuler.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes.
5 ayes. That bill is passed. We'll move it to the floor. Anybody? Oh, we've got a volunteer. Thank you, Senator Ellis. We'll carry it on the floor then. Thanks, everyone, for all your testimony, for all the good work from the task force, and appreciate all of you. Thanks for coming.